Hello there, this is a follow-up video from the previous in which I talk about how an operatic voice, a baritone voice, should be trained and how I'm training mine. And you might think, well, why do I care so much about this? It's because the practice that you do is really what your voice is, right? So if you're developing, you only really should experience that in the practice. Like this is the point, is that if you're, basically you're only as good as the noises you make in a practice room, right? So I would say the training aspect of singing, especially with opera, is ongoing, because actually, even when you're into a full-time career, you're still maintaining your voice, and you still might discover new qualities about your voice. So I think the mindset of constantly developing it is very important. I train operatically for sheer enjoyment. My work as a singer is not in opera. I do one concert every year in which I get paid to sing opera. The rest of the year, I'm just doing concerts, singing in choirs, recitals. I have been doing opera in concerts, but a lot of that is my own projects in which I'm not paying myself really. Although I would like to eventually. I think you can sing opera very well in concerts. I think there's no reason, like you can be an opera singer but not necessarily on a stage. Now, what I want to say is that further to my previous video, the conversation about covering sounds, or indeed vowel modification is categorically not how the great singers sang. None of them sang on them. They did not change. When they get to an E, they have to think of an oo through an air or whatever. No, they didn't do that. Because if they did, go and show me evidence. Put it in the comments. Because I can say what I hear when I hear the great singers singing, basically a huge amount of singers pre-1980s. What I hear is they're just singing in the low larynx. They're singing in low larynx, but they're resonating correctly according to the language. The reason why I can tell you that they didn't sing with vowel modification is because you hear the text. If you modify vowels, you can't hear the text as well, right? You hear the text very clearly. Like with Cappuccilli, you hear every single syllable that Cappuccilli sings. Stracciare, you hear every single syllable. The language is correct. It's because the feeling of the language is existing in the low larynx, or the open throat, if you like, and then, oh, it's existing in that space. It's the equivalent of me saying, Michael Flanders, Donald Swan. Michael Flanders, Donald Swan. Michael Flanders, Donald Swan. You see, you basically the language is existing in an increased space, which is what the low larynx is. Now, actually, if you think of that openness, if you think of it going higher, then you basically encourage the openness going into the sinuses in the head, and that with a really good vibrato. That's operatic singing. And I will say you're also engaging your transverse abdominis, which is what Italians mean when they talk about appoggio. Is here. I'm not changing my vowel. I'm not changing the vowels. I'm basically maintaining the feeling here in the low larynx. It's all coordinated. Those are things that you should do in exercises. And then when you go higher, you just maintain the space that you started from the low. The only thing I would say is very interesting that how Bruson, for example, it doesn't have much in the low range, and I think that's simply because his singing teacher probably trained him so much in that passaggio region that just neglected the low range. Now, I find that a bit weird, because actually, if you train the low to the top, then you just get the full compass of the voice. It's more efficient. But obviously, Bruson sounded amazing. So there isn't really. Actually, Armatushin could give him a run for his money, but there aren't really many singers of that caliber, and it's simply because people are just messing around with the wrong stuff. Like go and listen to all the greats, but they're not modifying vowels. Yeah, the coperto is the idea of covering. I'm never sure if it's coperto or coperto, but anyway, the idea of covering it is language that old Italian singing teachers used, but they didn't. Like my first singing teacher studied with Paolo Silveri, who studied with Stracciari. I think that's correct. Yeah. So, and Stracciari studied with Catoni, and Catoni knew Verdi. He was one of Verdi's favourite baritones. So I don't think that my singing teacher got the most out of his lessons, to be honest, but he never heard vowel modification being used from Silveri, because my singing teacher never mentioned the idea of vowel modification. My singing teacher did talk about the mask and stuff like that, but then he did have different. Rodney Gibson did talk about those different elements. And Rodney Gibson was also, if I'm honest, with opera, he wasn't the best teacher at all, because if I had seen David Kempster in my early 20s, I probably would be on the professional, hopefully world stage now. But it is what it is. You can't. There's nothing you can do about time. And I've learned a lot about singing, in a different capacity. And that's why I understand these things, because I know what you shouldn't do. Because I sang in vowel modification for years with Nick Powell. I'm sorry, but the guy really doesn't understand singing at all. He doesn't understand operatic singing. There are so many reasons why. And now this sounds like I'm just naming names but it's like, I've experienced these things. I've exchanged money with these people. They were rewarded with the money. That's how it works. If you're a singing teacher, someone rewards you with money. They don't reward you like with anything else. I don't owe any of these teachers anything, right? But I am very grateful to David Kempster because I've actually met somebody who actually understands how the voice works. And David does kind of allude to vowel modification elements, but ultimately I think he's of the same thinking. And actually, I think in practice he's of the same thinking with me, which is you sing the low larynx across your voice. That's operatic singing.